Yep, that's you. You just got backstabbed. And you should cry about it. You thought you could have a good time in your new favorite video game. But then, your immersion gets ruined by this guy. Now, before you go on Reddit and tell everyone how bad and broken the video game is, consider watching this video first, and learn not only how to perform backstabs yourself, but also how to avoid them, or punish. Whoever is watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and learned something new. Let's start off the video by just understanding the in-game mechanics. This is a really good video by Amir. He is a great content creator, and you should definitely check him out. This is him breaking down the backstab, and doing a great job at explaining how it works.
First, they added an additional check. The attacker screen is no longer the only one that matters. A secondary range check happens on the recipient screen just before being pulled into the backstab. Instead of the visual swing or poke initiating the backstab like in Dark Souls 2, this was now done with an invisible hitbox right in front of the attacker while they winded their weapon back. The poke itself would no longer cause backstabs, and instead simply do a small amount of damage in case the backstab attempt failed. With the teleport stab being gone, players can now simply roll, run, or walk away when an enemy player was clearly going to attempt a backstab, unless they use an attack with exceptionally high recovery, use the attack in a bad position, or if their opponent reads them and executes perfect movement. More skillful players can not only escape the backstabs, but space themselves and start their own attacks to punish the incoming backstab attempt from a safe range. The only problem with this system is, latency can still make things look bad on both ends, especially the receiving one. Being teleported 5 kilometers back into someone's sword is no longer an issue, but you can still be face stabbed. This is where a player turns to face a player but gets backstabbed anyway.
And that happens because you stay within this hitbox. It does not matter which way your character is facing, even if just your little toe is poking through the hitbox, you will get sucked back into the grab. Whenever you notice that someone's going to backstab you, you just have to step out of this yellow box. It doesn't matter which direction you go, you just have to stay out of it to avoid getting grabbed. And the box itself is pretty small, that makes it easy. However, let's talk about avoiding letting people grab you in the first place. You have probably experienced someone just running around your attack and backstabbing you in the past. There are multiple ways of preventing that from happening. Like, here's a couple of examples. Someone is trying to run around my attack and backstab me like this. What should I do in this situation? As you can see, just by barely free-aiming my attack, I can easily interrupt my opponent. This is probably the most effective solution. If you play with your swings unlocked, people usually won't even try to fish you because it's not optimal, it's too dangerous. Solution number 2. Use attacks with high tracking. As you can see in the clip, I predict that my opponent is going to try and backstab me, so I use an attack that has very high tracking and has little to no limit on my character's rotation. This lets me avoid letting my opponent get behind me, and they get to taste a heavy attack to the face. Solution number 3. Some players love to block with their weapons as they go for a backstab. It's a common habit, because holding the block usually prevents you from the Walmart pivot animation. If you notice this, simply just kick them, and you will most likely break their guard, while also getting a free riposte. Sometimes when you miss an attack, and you're already queued a second one, but you see that your opponent is going to backstab you, it is better to keep swinging away from your opponent instead of trying to attack them, because you will attack right into the grab box where they would get the backstab, and by aiming away from them, you avoid that. If your attack bounces off the wall, you can't get parried. You cannot get backstabbed as well. If you don't want to get parried while mashing R1, you should do it locked off. If you lock off and swing far to the right, you can dead angle your swings and avoid getting parried. But if you angle your attacks left, you hit your opponent faster, which can give you priority after trading attacks, or save you from getting parried by slower parry tools. You can dead angle weapon arts as well. The best single advice I can give to anyone that wants to avoid getting backstabbed is to play unlocked. Do not stay locked on at all times. Make sure you preempt some of your swings. That way you discourage your opponent to try and get behind you. becomes scary and makes it way more difficult for them to catch you. Here's some footage of me using an Ultra Greatsword, arguably the easiest to backstab weapon in the entire game. My friend Rodent is trying to fish me. Look how much more difficult it is for him to actually get behind me when I don't use lock on, when I free aim my swings. You can just dead angle your attacks and avoid backstabs, avoid parries, catch someone who's trying to roll away in an awkward angle that wouldn't normally get picked up by you just simply being locked on. Just knowing when you have to be locked on and locked off is incredibly important. It's a really good fundamental that you should master. Now, since you've got a pretty good idea on how to avoid getting fished, let's talk about how you can fish yourself. There are 3 different types of backstab grabs. You have the ultra class heavy grab, then you have the fist grab, and then you have the pokey grab. Pokey grab being the best because it has the fastest animation, naturally making it more difficult to escape. And almost every light weapon in the game has it, so it's very convenient. That would be it. However, there is one more grab. It's pretty terrifying what it can do. It is the rapier grab. The rapier class is unique. You could say it has a bugged grab box, because for whatever reason, it repeats itself twice. That means that even if you walk out of the grab animation, you can still walk back in it and get caught up in the second grab. That can lead to some pretty interesting backstabs. Against rapiers, you just want to keep your distance. Don't attack the opponent and don't walk into them until their animation fully ends, unless you know how to outspace the grab and you're confident about it. Most of the time you want to be grabbing your opponent from the left side, because the hitbox on the grab is actually around your weapon. It is more optimal to get the grab on the left side, because the hitbox is going to be straight on their back. And if you go on the right side, your weapon's just gonna be too far and they won't get pulled back into it. Some more examples of the grab box being centered around your weapon. And how powerful the rapier grab actually is. This is the optimal character placement to get a backstab. You want your weapon to be clipping into your opponent's back. And these are all the angles from which you are able to get the grab animation. Usually the longer the weapon, the more far away the grab you can get. I know it's the case for the rapier class, but I'm not sure if it applies to any other category. For me personally, getting backstabs with the dagger seems to be just as consistent as getting them with the spear. As a wise man once said,
actually the difference between rapier and dagger, the distance. You can get anus quickly with rapier, but dagger causes a lot of pain, like a lot painful. Small PP, but more damage.
you cannot backstab someone who's still in hitstun. If they're standing still after getting hit, you'll not be able to backstab them. But if they cue any movement, you will be able to get a grab.
Yeet! Yeet!
It is impossible to run around low latency unless they put themselves in an animation. What you can do though is a move called a reverse backstep. It's probably the fastest way of getting behind someone, but it takes some practice, timing and precision. On latency it's a different case. Your opponent's reaction to your character's movement is always delayed, and if you move quickly, they're unable to catch up with you, and that lets you get behind them.
You won't scare me, I'm only gonna hit you when you're delivering counterframes. Come on, swing, fuck boy, swing! Swing! I know you're swinging to a dagger. What the fuck?!
Let me teach you about the movement that you need to know if you want to optimize your fishing. You will see all of these being used to get a backstab in the later clip examples of the video. This is called a backstep, mostly used when someone's just running behind you. And this is a reverse backstep, probably one of the quickest ways of getting behind someone who's right in front of you. You can either choose the direction with your movement keys, or with your camera. This is a curved sword flip. It has a ridiculous amount of hyper armor. Probably the most hyper armor you can get this game. It can tank any attack without staggering you. Same as the backstep, you can change the direction you're going to flip to. This is a reverse roll. The way you do it is you lock onto someone, you walk backwards, you do an action, you cue a roll backwards out of that action, and then you instantly unlock. Why would you ever need to use a reverse roll instead of a regular roll? Well, normally rolling behind someone, you're not going to be instantly facing their back. You need to also turn around, which leaves you with less time to punish. On the other hand, a reverse roll will not only get you behind your opponent, but you will instantly be facing their back. It is a way faster way of getting a backstab. These are the default keyboard inputs for a reverse roll. Out of changing your grip, it works the same with self-swapping your weapon. This is probably the fastest version of a reverse roll, and it's doing it out of a stance. You walk back while locked on, you use your stance, you instantly roll backwards, and you unlock at the same time. The inputs are very tight, so it can be pretty difficult to do, but I'm sure that anyone can get it with enough practice. You can do it out of a roll as well, but it's a bit different. You need to have your back facing your opponent and not be locked on. You roll away from them, you lock on in the middle of a roll, you cue another roll backwards, and you unlock. These rolls are especially good if you're light rolling, because light roll covers an absurd amount of distance. A quick example of how much distance you can cover with a ravioli while light rolling. You should check out my montages. I'll show you all the examples that let you reverse roll. It's gonna take a while, so if you don't really care for that, you should just skip to this timestamp. Let's talk about the last bit of movement called pivoting. Being able to do pivots is essentially the most important fundamental for anyone that wants to fish backstabs.
I don't want to do this no more.
A pivot backstab is quickly getting behind your opponent and initiating an attack while not being locked on, because that way you have more fluid control over your character's movement. To do that, you can't just keep sprinting the entire time. As soon as you get behind your opponent, you need to let go of the sprint button, otherwise you're going to do a running attack. You don't want to be doing running attacks when you get behind someone. You want to stop and then press R1 to initiate a backstab. This is the animation that you do not want to see in your gameplay. It is known as
The I forgot I left my kids at Walmart animation.
The clip you just saw was from Project Goof, and I definitely recommend you check out his videos. He's made a guide on pivot backstabs and rolling backstabs. I won't go into as much detail about them in my video, so if you are fairly new, you should definitely check out these two videos. He gives very good examples. He even explains how the latency works and how you should take a different approach to it. Also shows examples with every weapon category and all the approaches that you have to take. These are very good videos, and a lot of the good players that play now have learned from these ones. Going back to the Walmart pivot animation, you do not want to get it in your gameplay. Once you're in this animation, you'll receive more damage, you can get backstabbed, and if you fail to pivot someone in the middle of a gank, you're pretty much dead. You get this animation when you try to turn around too quickly. For example, on keyboard, if you just hold W to run forward and hit the S key, which makes you instantly go into the opposite direction, that will cause this animation to happen. You need to turn around in a circular motion. You cannot just run and pull back on your stick to instantly face a different direction, or else you're gonna get the Walmart pivot animation. However, this is not always the case. For example, if you hold block, you cannot get this animation at all. You can run forward and just pull back on your stick and instantly be facing a different direction. The negatives of this being that you can easily get guard broken. If you're not using a shield, or if you're just blocking with your weapon and your weapon doesn't have a lot of stability, while you're going for someone's back, they can just guard break you very easily, and you'll just give them a free riposte, which might kill you.
Focus.
Large weapons that rest on your shoulder will also prevent this animation from happening, but only if you're two-handing the weapon. If the weapon is not resting on your shoulder with both hands, then you're still gonna be getting Walmart pivots. You can also avoid them by doing parry cancels. A parry cancel is when you parry, and being in the parry animation, it still allows you to get the grab. You cannot R1, but if someone turns their back towards you, you're able to still initiate the grab while being stuck in the parry animation. Parry cancels are also useful for backstabbing really quick weapons, because parrying gives you hyper armor. And with parry cancels, you can get behind someone, you can parry, and grab their back while having hyper armor. In some cases that can be pretty broken, but not a lot of players use parry cancels. If you see someone spamming it all the time, it's a sign of a bad fisher. Also, if someone is using it often, it's very easy to just punish them, because when you know that they're gonna go for a grab, they're gonna parry you, so just backstab them instead. What I'm doing here is a good way for you to practice to not fail your pivots. Just run around in a circular motion around two different objects. Once you get good at this without doing any Walmart pivots, you can add an extra step and do a full circle on each end. You want to be able to move like this all the time without messing up. The same way you can practice your reverse backsteps. Just run towards an object and try to jump behind it. If you want to practice it against an actual opponent, there are a few pretty good places for that. You could go straight to Pontiff and practice on Deacons. They're very good targets to do basic pivots on. You can also go and fight Lothric Knights, especially the ones that have a shield and a spear, because they often do a poke attack that can be strafed easily, and that's a good way to practice your pivots against someone who's attacking. You can also practice all of what you've learned on Drakeblood and Havel. They're pretty good to learn from because they simulate low latency PvP opponents. And they're very random with their moveset, so they're not very predictable. So you kind of get used to noticing opportunities and you just go for them. Because you don't want to always be doing things on prediction. You also want to see windows on when you can attack and get a backstab. Like if someone suddenly shows their back to you, you should be able to notice their weakness and punish them for it, instead of falling to panic and not really knowing what to do. Since we now know the basics, let's talk about how to backstab all kinds of different weapons, a lot of which most people tend to struggle with. Starting off with Greatswords. If someone is using a Greatsword that has the Hollow Slayer animation, you want to stick to the left side, otherwise you're going to get hit. But if someone is using a regular Greatsword moveset, you want to circle them on the right side. However, if your opponent is free aiming their swings to counter your backstab attempts, you can only predict which way they're going to swing. If they swing on the right side to counter your usual path and you manage to predict that, you should go left instead. Most other weapons in the game you also want to be circling on the right side. A lot of people struggle to get a grab against the Gaels weapon art. The way you do it is, instead of going for their back, you grab them on the side like this.
Or pay attention to the direction that the sweep is going. The direction they sweep in, that's where their back is going to end up.
A second option would be to completely ignore the backstab potential and parry it instead. Gaels weapon art is extremely easy to parry. Dealing with Farron Greatsword is very easy if you can space it. As they sweep in towards you, they give you their back, and it's extremely easy to punish. If you're using a shield, you don't even have to try. They basically give it to you for free. You can even do this if you want to make a fool out of your opponent. You can also duck the scythe, but that one you have to do completely on prediction. I recently had an argument with someone who claimed that Ring Knight Spear is very easy to backstab, which it is, if your opponent is bad and plays locked on the entire time. However, if it's a good player who knows how to free aim, you will almost never get a chance to backstab it. That's why I would suggest parrying it instead. Just like Gaels, it is very easy to reaction parry on all latencies, and there are 3 different parry windows for it if they proceed with a full weapon art. In my opinion, parrying it is a way better choice than trying to backstab it. Then we have the Ring Knight paired Ultras, a total noob slayer of a weapon because new players don't know how to roll it. Both the regular L1 moveset and the weapon art are very tricky to roll, but once you know how to do it, it's not a big issue anymore. For the weapon art, you want to roll it after they start launching towards you, and not as they're winding up, and after you get behind them you can try to backstab. You can also do it with a reverse roll. For the regular L1 moveset, the timing is very tricky. You want to let them do the wind up as they slowly push towards you, and then you time your roll right before they accelerate. The first part of the wind up can still stagger you, so what I usually do is walk back a little to space the hitbox and roll as they accelerate towards me. After that I can just backstab it. If you miss the first backstab and they still continue with the same moveset, you You can just follow them along until they leave a second opening. Another attack that's really hard to roll is the Ledo R2 pebble smash. You need to roll right before it hits the ground, otherwise you will get caught up in the pebble explosion, which combos into another R1 or the weapon R. The next weapon on our list is Gundyr's. A lot of players new and somewhat experienced tend to struggle against Gundyr charges, but it's actually very easy to roll unless their timing and positioning is perfect. What you need to do is roll directly into the charge, that way you end up behind them. You want to always be aiming for the left side of the charge that's coming into you. If you mess up and roll to the right side, they will most likely get you up in the attack. But be careful against good players. If you don't feel confident that the time you have left to land a grab is going to be guaranteed, you should probably avoid going for a backstab. If it's a smart and inexperienced player, they will notice your mistake and will punish it in their own way. If you're fighting someone who knows how to fish themselves, you should be especially careful about your backstab attempts, or else you could easily get counterfished. You can also try rolling backwards and then back into their charge. Doing 2 rolls will leave you with less time to backstab, most of the time at least. So on high latency, I would suggest trying to avoid it with a single roll. Some weapons that are centered around big combos can get outplayed if you guard block the first hit. Blocking the R1 will usually let you roll out of the upcoming weapon or follow-up, which can lead into a guaranteed backstab punish. Although be careful, because you don't want to get guard broken. Make sure that you only do it against someone who you think will be most likely to do the full combo, because if they decide to R1 you twice instead, you will get guard broken because regular R1s will keep you stuck blocking for at least 2 hits. Let's be honest, no one actually uses the split leaf variant, but if you manage to find someone who does, then this is an easy way to backstab it. Or if you're fighting the more common version, then you can just escape the full combo if you block it. Sadly, there is no way to backstab punish it. The recovery is just too instant. If someone is chasing you while locked on, you can do a turn and burn pivot to backstab them. If they are locked on and unaware, then the lock-on will usually guide them back into your grab box. This works very well on latency. On low latency, it is way more difficult and your pivot needs to be really tight. You also kind of want to slow down your character right before you do the pivot, or else you're going to miss the backstab. Sometimes it also works if you just backstep. There's also a rule that if your opponent is sprinting, you want to be walking, and if they're walking, you want to be sprinting. Make sure you're careful about who you try to do these pivots against and when you do them. You want them to be unexpected, or do it against players who don't know how to counter them, because otherwise people can easily stray away from the grab and punish you for it. Turn and burn pivots aren't very hard to read or react to unless they're timed and executed really well. You should also practice your spacing because it is the most important fundamental of the entire game. RUSTIC play is centered around outspacing and punishing your opponents, but the same type of play can be applied to fishing. You space some of the attacks and you rush in to backstab them during an upcoming windup. If you're going for style and are fast with your hands, you can even swap your weapon after initiating the grab if your opponent hits you. Getting hit during a grab removes the black screen in your inventory and lets you swap weapons. Unless there is high latency, people will be able to backstab you while healing. Instead of healing or doing an estus cancel in their face, you should rather stay locked on and walk backwards when healing, otherwise they will backstab you easily. If you're locked on and walking back on low latency, it will be almost impossible for them to get behind you. The only way they could do it is with a reverse backstep, and it's still incredibly difficult to do. If you want to estus cancel in front of someone, you should learn how to cancel it while looking forward. It's basically the same cancel as you would use for split leaf infinite. I won't explain how to do any of those in this video, just look up on YouTube how to do estus cancels. And now we are finally really done with the basics. Let's move on to some tech.
15 turtling duelists exploiting their teching each other till they can't tech anymore.
Let's talk about how you can fish some people that are playing Rustic, the duelist type of playstyle. Starting off with Estoc trades. People often force Estoc trades because of Leo ring thrust counter damage advantage. If you read someone doing it, you can strafe their poke to the side, depending on which hand they are using to attack. If they're poking you on the right, you should go left. If they're poking you on the left, you should go right. Make sure to do your pivot as tight as possible because rapiers are really fast. We all know the Reddit pseudo combo, the straight sword R1 R1 R2. If you know that your opponent is going to do an R2, you can reverse backstep out of stun and get a guaranteed backstab on them. Some people love their moveset swaps. If you've ever done them yourself, you will instantly recognize the timing for it, especially if your opponent does it often. Same type of situation as the previous clip, you can reverse backstep out of stun to get a guaranteed grab. It's even easier against daggers, because they have almost no stun. We're all going to end up chased by a Corvian at some point. Just know that you can actually get around the weapon art from the left. Depending on how they play, it can be pretty difficult. If they follow it up with an R1 right after, your timing and movement need to be really fast and precise. But if they just spam the weapon art, it should be pretty easy to get around. Look how I make the pivot for myself easier by unlocking before I do it, and positioning myself to the best angle while I'm still blocking the attack. You can strafe a spear after just blocking the first R1 depending on the latency. You can also interrupt the spear after 2 R1s with any hyper armor weapons, or something that's faster than the spear itself. If you read an upcoming running attack, you can strafe it pretty easily.
Just remember that the more latency you have with your opponents, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to strafe their attacks.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we have to rotate. It's not gonna be able to strafe. I tried, but that's not gonna work.
If people try to force roll catches on prediction with poke weapons, you can strafe that as well. If you read someone doing a Greatsword running attack, you can position yourself in a way that you end up right behind them after you get hit. If you do it with a shield, you can avoid the damage as well. If someone likes to attack out of hitstun, you can backstab them in the middle of their swing, but you need to be really fast for it. I would suggest you angling your attack more to the right, so that you need less time to rotate, therefore getting faster to their back.
Nice.
It is way easier to do it on high latency, because due to latency, their attack won't throw you out of the grab. Parry cancels also really help on these type of backstabs. If someone is using a murky against you, doing reverse rolls out of rolls is a great way of getting behind them as they try to chase you. It's good on every latency. If people quickstep into you a lot, you can easily pivot behind them the same way you would grab someone that rolls into you. If you roll on prediction, you can roll backstab, straight swords, or even curved swords. If you want to know more about this, check out the Project Goofs videos I mentioned earlier. If you have enough poise, you can tank one swing from a light weapon during your roll without getting staggered. Make sure you remember to reset your poise with perseverance back to 100%. You can also use stomp weapon arts to do that as well. You should also learn how to backstab people that roll into you. It's very easy, and that's why most fishers use weapons like spears, because people just tend to roll into your attacks. A lot of players tend to panic roll into the same direction as they were previously walking to. Knowing that, you can't predict their roll path and the roll catch them if they lock on back onto you. It can be pretty difficult to do though. Remember back when I said that you want to make your turn and burn pivots be unexpected? This would be a pretty good example. I attack my opponent, pretend like I feel in danger because of multiple other opponents that are close to me, so I choose to back away. When really, it's just a quick bait that lets me do a really quick pivot that would be hard to react to, especially in latency when my opponent has delayed reactions to my own character. I feint myself moving away from him and then rush back in, so that on his end, he has to react to my fake out while I'm already closing in the distance, because our connection is delayed. This is another example of a pretty good surprise pivot. When you're fighting someone rustic, you really want to pay attention to their habits, if your goal is to backstab them. Also, you should get decent at spacing as well. Sometimes when players feel like they're going to get out spaced and punished after withing an attack, they turn away to gain distance from you, so you couldn't space punish them. The player in this clip had already done that against me multiple times, so I tried to condition him into doing it again, and then rushed in for a backstab the moment I predicted he would show me his back.
Bro, Angon is fucking with me. What?
Stuff like this can happen as well, and if someone moves like that all the time, you could potentially read it. Now, this is a really important thing to learn, because it is the most consistent method of backstabbing good players. And this is probably the only backstab that is really broken. It is called the Inescapable Backstab. There is a way to backstab someone in the middle of their roll, even if they don't turn around or stop. It requires a lot of precision though. You must be in the most optimal backstab positioning possible by clipping yourself into your opponent from the left side so your weapon is right in their back, and then timing your backstab as their legs go up in the air. You cannot escape a backstab like this, and a lot of good players tend to force panic rolls on you in order to get it. My best advice of you avoiding it, if someone tries to do it against you, is to, instead of rolling forward, you should roll northeast, which would be the furthest angle from their grab box. Or if you and your opponent have high latency, this is pretty much impossible to do. Beyond that, you would only get this backstab if they stop moving, start walking, or start running out of the roll. If they double roll, you will not get it on latency. Your goal is to force a predictable panic roll
And guess the direction. If you block an attack, you can instantly rotate yourself for a backstab, but you need to start rotating the second you get hit. Otherwise, you'll have to wait out the hitstun first, to make it possible for them to escape. Basically react to the frame where you get hit, and turn around at the same time.
BAM! Didn't see that! I heard, so that's probably why. Another one! Oh my god. Oh!
If you fail to position yourself behind them, you can reverse step instead. There's a thing called stance escape. When you get hit in the back, you can use L2 to get out of true combos against most weapons. Now if you do that with a katana, it lets you get a pretty cool parry setup.
You can also use stance escape to get out of hitstun and get a backstab while your opponent does not expect it.
This actually works with any weapon, not just stance weapons. If you get hit in the back, you're able to use your weapon art, and if you have a weapon art that gets instant hyper armor, you can use it to win trades. A lot of people swap to quickstep to escape true combos. Against some ultras, you don't even need to be getting hit in the back to escape the second R1. If you backstab someone, you can force a panic roll and wake up and try to backstab them again. If they queue an action out of the roll, you'll be able to backstab them again. But if they only roll, you shouldn't be able to backstab the first roll and wake up. Poise casting is a thing and lets you have passive hyper armor. You can interrupt the start of most spells with either a pivot cancel, or a roll, or a backstep. You can do trade backstabs like this on reaction. You can also do this with perseverance. You can block the first R1, then reverse backstep to backstab the second R1 against ultras. Most of the time you want to be aiming for the right side of the opponent. Your opponent can easily avoid this if they just preempt their swings. Another really good way of getting a fast grab against ultras is doing a reverse quickstep. To do it, you just quickstep backwards and unlock a few frames after. You basically unlock at the same time as you quickstep. Barely anyone knows this, but the follower's torch has the strongest kick in the game. Even without any rings, it can guard break someone using Black Knight's shield if they're barely just under 40 endurance. And if you add the rings that increase stamina or kick damage, you can guard break a Havel's Great Shield, which is the best shield in the game, on 40 endurance. And if you use both rings, You can guard break Havel's Great Shield on maximum 99 endurance with a single kick as well. Two-handing the torch also makes it do more stamina damage. You can tank ultra swings with stomp weapon arts on reaction and then go in for a backstab. If you look away during the stomp, you're able to reverse roll. You also have enough time to correct yourself if you mess up. Greatsword flips can tank through any attack in the game without staggering you, and they can be viable against weapons that are as fast as regular greatswords or slower. People often tend to attack out of stun after they get hit by a running attack, so queuing a reverse kick against someone who does that often would be a pretty good idea. By the way, one-handed kick is way faster than two-handing it. You can also roll in to bait a roll catch and kick flip through their attack. Soft swap or grip swap reverse rolls are also great while baiting ultras. If you shield poke someone as they attack, you get hyper armor, but you need a lot of stamina to be able to tank that without getting guard broken. Also, it's not going to work against fast weapons, because they can R1 faster than you recover. On low latency, you have a cool way of parrying their second R1. Since people have to attack after getting hit by a running attack, you can do this pretty viably against inexperienced players. Let's get to the best part of the video. What counter fishing means is having the ability to read whenever your opponent is going to try and backstab you and counter them with your own backstab, or a parry, or another kind of punish. You get better at it with experience, to the point where you're able to play like this naturally. So, to start off, let's talk about the roll-in punish. If someone tries to roll in backstab you, you're able to counter them. You have to hold block after your attack to cancel the recovery faster, and then turn around before they're able to grab you. Sometimes you can get an animation like this with no damage. What it means is that you both got the backstab at the same time, and because of that, you're both in iframes, so you don't receive damage. The same animation plays on your opponent's screen as well. You can also leave their grab box before they are able to backstab you. Remember that the grab box generates in front of your weapon, so when spacing your opponent's backstabs, you want to keep that in mind, and avoid the grab to the opposite side of their weapon, otherwise you will walk back into their grab box and get backstabbed. Now, here's when the fun starts. The mind games. When you meet someone that is good at fishing themselves, it becomes difficult to get a backstab through regular means. And the easiest way to backstab them would usually be to make them backstab you first. Step 1. You throw out a bait. Step 2. They fall for the bait and try to grab you. Step 3. You do your best to avoid their grab box. And step 4. You act quick to get a successful punish. Let's repeat that again. Step 1. You throw a bait. Step 2. They take the bait. Step 3. You avoid the grab box. Step 4. you punish them. And there could be a million of different scenarios where the same steps play out. Ultimately, your goal is to make yourself look vulnerable, while actually having enough time to escape and stay safe. Give your opponent a false sense of confidence, and then punish them for being too careless and underestimating you too much. If you're not fast enough, it could lead to a chain of failed grabs like this, till one of you gets tight enough. Usually this happens when you play against rapiers, because avoiding the rapier grab box can be very tricky. You can bait people with pretty much anything, just make sure that you'll have enough time to avoid their attempts at punishing. For example, a really nice bait that I like is pretending that you're stuck on an obstacle, so people feel confident about grabbing you.
There is a way to reverse your backstabs. The way it works is that you push in the direction that you want the backstab to go, in about the same frame in which you push the R1 button or light attack button to initiate the backstab. Now, for the longest time this was thought to be useless. However, one use has been found for it, which is countering counterfishing. However, this is extremely hard to do, as you not only have to do the pretty much frame perfect turnaround with the R1 at the same time, but you also have to do 2 turns. One isn't frame perfect, but since this is in its essence a pivot backstab, you have to stay 1 towards your opponent, stop running, turn around to initiate the backstab, and as you initiate the backstab, turn around again. Now on controller this would be extremely difficult. However, I do think on keyboard and mouse one could potentially learn to do this consistently, and it would be an extremely useful tool, especially for countering passive fishers. Go ahead.
Here are some cool baits you can do by cancelling weapon arts with rolls or backsteps. There's only a few of them that you can cancel like this. I think I'm showing all of them, but I might be wrong. You probably don't see anything special about this clip in particular, but there are some mind games involved. My opponent misses an attack. I run up behind them. They think that I will try to backstab them, and they roll away avoiding the grab. But since I can recognize that I don't have enough time for the backstab to go through, instead, I look 1 step ahead, ignoring the first backstab potential, and act on their roll by grabbing it with an inescapable. If someone is slow to act on your roll in, or just tries doing obvious pivots, you can backstab them as they try to get behind you. And this is just a punish for players that are 1 out of stun. Works really well on latency. If you play on keyboard and mouse, you can counter pivot attempts way faster if you rotate yourself while walking forward through the camera motion. Walking in a single direction and moving yourself with the camera also prevents Walmart pivots. If someone is trying to slowly circle behind you, you can either circle into them yourself and get a grab that way, or let them circle around you and then backstep. Remember to always study your opponent's playstyle and their movement patterns. If you know their playstyle well enough, you can use it against them. Don't be afraid to play around with your backsteps. They're very quick and people struggle to read them. Sometimes if you're lacking distance, a second backstep might just do the trick. Stuff like this takes a lot of time and experience to pick up, but the better you become yourself, the better you'll be able to understand your opponents. And the latency. Due to latency, people react to each other on a delay. On my screen, I'm already evading their upcoming grab, but on their screen, I'm still giving them my back. Outplaying people on latency is just being one step ahead, or abusing players who don't know how to play without lock-on. If they keep locked onto you the entire time, it is very easy to exploit backstabs on latency, because it's very often for them to walk back into your grab.
Usually the most optimal way of backstabbing someone on latency is just forcing trades. You either want to roll into them and backstab them as they are on you, or you try to pivot behind them during a wind-up. Because on latency, if you trade with someone while going for a backstab and you still cue the grab, even if you get thrown out of the grab, it will still register because of the delay. But if you just try to roll catch someone on latency, that's not going to work. In order for that to work, they would need to do a rolling attack, which would then trade with your grab. That's why forcing trades is the way to go.
There is no magic to getting good at fishing. It all comes down to experience. You want to try to go for as many grabs as you can until you're able to understand how it all works and what's safe to go for and what isn't. Don't be discouraged by failure. Everyone starts somewhere. You can become a great fisher by just doing pivots or catching people's rolls. But I would really recommend trying to get used to all the fundamental movements. You want to learn when you need to use backsteps, when it's a good opportunity to do a reverse roll, when it's a good chance to pivot someone, and so on. You want to practice it all to develop a well-rounded fishing-based playstyle where you're able to see all the openings the game can offer you. Sometimes I watch people play, but they only focus on pivots, and I see a ton of great missed opportunities that could have come from using other kinds of fundamental movements. Don't be missing out on that stuff. Try it all out, until you see what fits for you the best.
Black Knight Great Axe has one of the best wake-ups in the game. If you perfectly time the R2, it is impossible to escape. If you roll away just to gain distance, it will still catch up with you, unless you have light roll. And if you try to roll to the side, you can just slightly free him the R2 and still catch your opponent. This is probably the absolute best wake-up in the game, because it is impossible to escape no matter what. If you have Sage Ring +2, and you cast Lightning Storm after landing a backstab, your opponent should not be able to escape the wake-up unless they have a ton of latency. The next second best wake-up is the straight sword backswing, just because it is impossible to escape. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it's a very good finisher if they're low in health. Without Horner Ring, you can set up the timing by throwing a throwing knife instantly after you backstab someone. That will get you the perfect backswing timing to hit the wake up. Then we have the Lothric Straight Sword, and its R2. The best thing about this wake up is that you can charge the R2 and release it on reaction to when your opponent rolls. It also has a lot of mix-up potential because its weapon art actually looks like the R2, so it can pretend to feint with the weapon art and then do an R2 when they panic roll. Or if they don't panic roll and they just R1 you as they get up from the ground, you can use the weapon art to hyper armor through their attack and win the trade. Or you could also use the same weapon art to roll catch them, again for a different timing. Fully charged R2 can combo to another R2 or an R1. Then we have the Gundyr's charge, which is one of the best wake-ups in the game as well, because a lot of people don't know how to roll it, especially after getting backstabbed. I mean, I showed you how to do it. You better keep it in mind, because this is a very common wake-up. Did you know that you can actually parry backstab attempts? However, it is pretty difficult to do, because first, you need to space out the grab box, otherwise you'll just get back sucked into the grab. You space the upcoming backstab, and then you parry the grab. To parry it, you want to be as close as possible to the opponent's weapon, and you want to aim your parry towards their hand. You want to parry their hand. Remember that after spacing the grab, you need to walk back in. That's why you're parrying the hand, because if you try to parry the end of the weapon, you're not going to get the parry off. If you get the correct timing, and they miss the backstab, you're still probably going to parry their R1. If you see that they're going for backstab very late, and they will definitely miss it, they can just backstep away and parry the R1. A really good time to parry someone is when you miss a backstab. That's when people think you're vulnerable, and they try to attack you. You want to make yourself look vulnerable, and predict when your opponent is going to attack. You basically want to manipulate your opponent into giving you a parry, same as you would with backstabs. Otherwise you're just gambling by parry spamming, which we all know it works really well, but it makes you look like a fool. A really good parry bait is to estus cancel on someone's face and then parry instantly, because people always want to punish heals. This is also pretty good bait. You shoot someone with a crossbow up close, they think that you're going to reload, or that they have a priority or whatever, and they try to R1 you, but you just swap to a parry tool and parry them. You can roll into someone's first R1 and parry the second one on a lot of weapons. You can use roll Poise to tank a hit as you roll into someone and parry the next one. If you don't reset your Poise and it's not on maximum by default, you won't be able to do it though. On high latency, if you parry the first R1 on a reaction, you're going to actually parry the second R1. This swap right here is the fastest parry in the entire game. It works out of weapons that have a stance. Basically do an R1 or any action, you can do this out of a roll as well. You Q an action, and then in the middle of that action you Q an L2, so you could roll and hit an L2. You can R1 and hit an L2, and the second your black screen unlocks, you swap to a main hand shield, then it parries automatically with the fastest parry animation in the game. You can block an attack and then remove your weapon. That will let you parry your opponent. You can also change your shields out of stun to parry them. You can parry the third spin of Split Leaf of its helicopter attack. First one has a hitbox, it hurts you. Second one doesn't have a hitbox, so you can just walk in it. And the third one has a parryable hitbox. After the third one ends, it becomes no longer parryable, so you can only parry the third one. You can parry the freed scythe, and you want to be aiming for the scythe that's not glowing. The scythe that glows blue is unparryable, but the other one is completely fine to parry. And these are just a bunch of random other weapons that people usually don't know are parryable. Give it a watch. Maybe you'll discover something new as well. Either way, the video is coming to an end. I wanted to make a video like this for a long time, but I felt like I wasn't ready to make it myself. You can still find a lot of people playing though. And I really hope that this video helps someone out with developing their playstyle. Let's keep this game alive for as long as we can, and try to enjoy the most out of it. I also want to give a big thanks to people who helped me out. Please check out Rodent Snipe on Twitch. He streams occasionally. He helped me out with filming most of the showcase clips. Also Ice, Angon, and Freshbaka. They helped me out as well. Make sure to check out all the content creators that you've seen mentioned through the video. They're all great. And thanks a lot for watching all the way through. I hope I was able to help someone to learn a new thing or two. Happy New Year's everyone.